have been in this game a long time, and if you don't know who I am, Randy Shafer, I'm the USA Cycling's technical director, and the simplest way to say what I do is I take care of the things that a lot of people don't want to take care of. Anybody heard of suspensions and discipline? Yeah, that's one of the things that I get to do, which is one of the tasks that I'm actually pretty good at, but I really don't like. It's really a difficult job at times to try to listen to people about what their lives are like and what they did in a bike race and why what they did was okay, even though they knocked people down, or being rude and many other things that they can do. So I spend a lot of time just dealing with what people are upset about. And that's sort of exactly what you do at a race, isn't it? We spend a lot of time being very visible and having people ask us how we want to handle things. So one of the things that I enjoy about these symposiums is that we're learning. That's probably one of our biggest pieces of knowledge that we always have to have, is that we can always learn. As we got started this morning, I got to see Bruce and other friends from the past. Now, as Bruce was saying today, he said when you start talking about the 90s, it's like, oh yeah, that's when we'd already been in it for a few years. And things are starting to develop a little bit. And the momentary things that we shared were what we do as officials now, we were doing then, but we just did them differently. Today we're going to be talking about different features of what people do, how they do it well. Most everybody here has scored a race by hand, and most everybody here probably works on a fairly frequent basis with photo finish systems. Cameras that can really stop, can scan, maybe there's two cameras on the line. Jim was regaling me with somebody who actually figured out how to hook up Polaroids so that they could take 10 pictures over a tenth of a second each. And I started out with a Minolta rep who I talked into using all of his latest motor drive equipment. So we'd stand him up on a 16-foot ladder on the edge of a raceway, and he would pan the riders as they came through. We had 8 or 9 judges, each picking 2 places, so we overlapped each other. And then I would go develop the film overnight so we could finalize the results. So it's a work in progress, and we continue to do that, and we continue to learn. And so that's really what I want to talk about today as we come together to do this, is how we continue to create and renew ourselves, refresh ourselves in a system in a moment like this where we get together with other people that have knowledge and experiences is one of those really important things. I've got a bunch of notes here, and so I'm going to try to keep on task with them. And so much as a keynote address, things are changing. And right now we're living in a really unprecedented time in the United States. And if anybody wants to talk coronavirus with me, I'd love to regale you for several hours, because I certainly have my opinions, as most everybody in this room does. The problem is it's about information, it's about leadership, it's about knowledge, it's about what we do know, what we don't know. And so much of that comes into play in our lives as officials. I appreciated Tony's remarks about making the decision to come here today. Looking around this room, what's the average age? I can tell you that if I do a download of officials and I calculate everybody's age, it's 55 plus. And so that means that we are an experienced and seasoned group of people who somehow survived to this point, so I'm pretty sure we're going to continue to survive. So thank you for making that decision to come here as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we think about what we do as officials, why we're officials, what we're bringing to the game. So I wanted to talk about crisis. Right now we believe we're in a crisis. The government may think we're in a crisis. World Health Organization thinks we're in a crisis. The news media is pretty sure we're all going to die tomorrow, and they would like to film that. So we sort of have some really varying perspectives. So just as a poll, how many think the coronavirus is the biggest boogeyman of forever? Does anybody believe it's a new strain of pneumonia? There's a lot of things here that are going on that we don't know. There is a lot of information that everybody would like to figure out. The real science on this is probably a year away. It's probably at least that. And during that time, everything that we're seeing now, the hype, the angst, etc., is going to diminish. Now, if everybody starts dying like the Black Plague, then I'm wrong and the news can be right. But my general life experience has told me that that's not going to be the case. Now, it's the same thing as an official. You can be in that moment, in that situation, and things are going wrong, and somebody's angry, and things are happening, and we have to learn how to manage those situations. That's really what our job is as an official. My moment of really big angst in the sport was at the Tour de France a few years ago, and I was in a car that had guests in it. We were towards the back of the day. We stopped and took a small break because at the tour, the people they put in the back of your car get champagne, and they usually need to recycle. So we had stopped after the descent on the Tourmalet that had not gone as we wanted. The president had told me without equivocation that he wanted my car behind his with 5 team cars, and we were supposed to make that descent with the leaders. The direction was, even if there's stragglers that are going to get on those 5 cars, I want them there. So I was on the radio. I asked Radio Tour to make the announcement. I made the announcement myself in English and French. I stood through the car. I pointed to the 5 cars. 5 cars come with me. And as we went forward, the regulator stopped them. So we went over the top of the Tourmalet with the top 5 riders. And all we had was President's car, wasn't Shimano, it was Mavic at the time, and then my car. And we had leaders who immediately had mechanicals and teams that were being held and no way to bring them forward. Now that wasn't the bad situation. Bad situation is at the bottom when I have guests in their campaign, and my driver is standing beside of the road while I'm sitting there kind of looking at the seconds going, okay, come on, my bladder works faster than this. He just looks at me and he goes, ooh, trouble. And I look up to see Movistar car at about 100 kilometers an hour with a rider on the other side with an arm like this. So I immediately called forward to some of the other officials. I asked them to be aware of this. And by the time I finally got the people back in the car, we took several minutes to drive back up. I conferred with the motor official. I asked if they had seen the person still hanging onto the car. And the reply in French was no, but they were buried in the trunk, basically on the back of the car coming back. Now this had been probably, I would say, 4 minutes after we had gone through with what had been the coalesced peloton at that point in time. I made a call to the president of the panel, thinking that I was going to observe and report, and momentarily there was an announcement on Radio Tour disqualifying this rider. I'd seen it, I'd reported it, something was going to happen. To me, I'd done my job, but the controversy was incredible. Finished the stage, the rider had finished the stage even though he'd been withdrawn from the race. The team was angry, the sponsor was angry. I actually had the sponsor of the team in my face. Had to go to a hotel that night. The next morning the press was calling, and it was really quite a difficult situation. But in the end, it went away. In the end, the media, the hype, all the problems that were happening at the time that made me feel so much pressure, it simply evaporated. And over time, I look back at that decision and I think, would I have done that again? Would I do it the same way? And we all go through that. We go through that continually as we make decisions as an official. That's going to bring me into where we are today. I want to talk a little bit about USA Cycling and how things have changed and where we fit in. I think that's probably the most difficult thing we face right now is where does everybody fit in the sport? Anybody notice the landscape is changing in how races are happening? What's the biggest thing that's happening that's outside what we normally are involved in? Gravel, bondos. Where do officials fit in those? People care if there's an official there or not? Do they care if the placings are wrong?
Yes. Yeah.
Do they call us? Just thinking right now about what's happening with races being canceled. Yesterday, we had probably an hour of being yelled at by people who were upset that races had been canceled that aren't sanctioned with USA Cycling. Why? Because we're USA Cycling. We're perceived as a leader. We're perceived to somehow be involved. Guess what happens when somebody goes to a gravel event and the race organizer disqualifies somebody for taking their hands off the handlebars? It's fun though. It's a gravel race, but yeah, it's actually happened. People call us. So again, we're out there as the authority of the sport, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually something that really you should think about in terms of a resource. So again, we've had all these things that have been happening. I've seen a lot of change. A lot of people in this room have seen a lot of change. I made a note on my notes here about that we've had a lot of change in the last 2.5 years since I took the job as technical director. Now that actually counts as 5 years if you count the fact that I actually worked between 95 and 97 before I got fired, and now I'm back again. So talk about being able to reinvent yourself. The time I've had in the sport has been significant. I started out as a racer in 1979. I became an official in 1983, and things have changed significantly. And as we talk about this, I think you'll be able to actually reflect on your own journey here. I see people here that are pretty young, that have started the sport not too many years ago, that I've had a chance to be involved in some way or another in their education, or getting to see them start their first races and start to move up. But we have this journey that we've made, and so much of it is about because we've done it that way. It's because we've always done it that way. It's because it's in the rule book. All those things are a part in reality of who we are and a part in reality of what the sport is, but things are changing. We think about how people come into the sport nowadays. When I started the sport, it was really a niche sport. I got into it because it was a time in the world that people were thinking about alternative transportation, sports that weren't ball sports, and little bits of information that came back and forth from Europe about who the great riders were. It was kind of a mystique. Then we ended up with what's our movie Breaking Away, and then we ended up with Lance, and then people learned about the sport in different ways. And so my experience was I discovered a sport. I had actually no family history in the sport, and I simply got involved because my brother went to the University of Washington. Does anybody know the name of the velodrome out there now? It's called the Jerry Baker Velodrome. Jerry Baker passed away just recently. But Jerry Baker and his brother roomed in the same boarding house that my brother did. And when my brother decided to get a bicycle at the University of Washington back in 1972, they insisted he go buy a racing bicycle, which he did. And a year later, as he needed to go on and make some more money, I bought that for $100 and decided it was pretty cool. But most people came into the sport because they had relatives in the sport. Does anybody here belong to the Dyno Riders site? Few people. It's basically old guys getting a lot faster as they tell their stories again. And lots of old pictures, and they're a lot of fun to look at. But there's cycling dynasties, there's families. There's the Frazes, there's the Signs, there's people who've been in this sport forever. And people inherited this sport. Somehow somebody got involved, maybe it was a family member, maybe it was grandparents, and they were able to hand the sport down. What's one of the biggest complaints you hear about the growth of the sport? Does anybody ever get the poke in the chest and say, what are you doing about juniors? Or why are you making it so hard for juniors? My first question at my first national championship when I came to work in 1995 was Masters, and a man came up to me, and I had a blue shirt on, and so they wanted to talk to me, and he started, doing the, I can't believe you guys aren't doing more about juniors. And I looked at him and I said, are you married? And he says, yeah. And he says, do you have any kids? He goes, no. And I looked at him and said, that's where kids come from, families, people that know about the sport. You don't have your own kids. Are you finding people that want to be involved in the sport? Are you finding people that are interested? Well, there's a lot of new programs today that have been really fantastic in bringing people into the sport that might not ever understand or see it. Those are the things we're looking for, and that's, again, part of what we do. I'll get to some of that in a moment in terms of how we fit in as officials. Part of where we're at today and part of what people look at us as is the government. I like to jokingly say people think we're the federal government of cycling. Must be people in charge, there must be money, they must not be allocating it, they must be ignoring it, they must not know what they're doing, etc. But I think one of the things that I'll just focus on right now is that we are in a huge state of flux. We are trying to allocate, marshal resources and make things. Right now, we have been fortunate to have some significant changes in leadership. Anybody have any sentiments about what it felt like to be an official 5 years ago? About 10 years ago? Anybody remember those times when things felt a little difficult? What used to be the mantra that we used to get hit over the head with?
Unnecessary evil.
Unnecessary evil. Why are you here? Customer service used to be the big mantra. You're not serving your customers. I remember a period of time where every symposium I went to, every board of directors meeting I went to, every meeting I went to at the Federation offices when I wasn't working there was, you guys suck at customer service. You just don't know how to take care of people. You can't argue with people. You can't do this. You can't do that. And those things are really bad for us. It really made it difficult. Anybody want to guess how many officials we used to have? Let's just say 15 years ago. A lot more than now. We are at about 1/3 of our officiating capacity that we had. At one time, we had about 3,400 people licensed as officials. Where do you think those people have gone? Look around this room. We're aging. People have aged out of the sport. They've decided they don't want to do it anymore. They're tired of it. It's difficult work. They spend a lot of time trying to figure out what they're doing with their lives. Right now we have a lot more family pressure. We have a lot more things going on with our kids. There's so many more things that really push us maybe out of the sport. There's also a period of time where it just wasn't very much fun. How many of you renewed your license so far this year? How fun was that?
Much better.
I'm glad to hear that. That's the first one I've heard of that. I literally spend hours a day trying to get people relicensed. We have some really new significant challenges in how we manage the sport. Have people been keeping track of the Safe Sport work on our page, some of the new things that they've been doing? Kelsey Erickson has been doing a fantastic job for us, and I just want to give her a call out on that. But there's so many things that are so important in the sport now. Safe sport. Why do we have safe sport? Anybody ever heard of USA Gymnastics, USA Swimming? That translated it and that rolled over to everybody in the sport. It's not about whether we actually are in close contact with youth or we have close contact with youth. It's that we're an adult, we have children around us, and so we have to. Safe sports made a lot of changes as well. Why do we have criminal background checks? Used to not think that was important. I used to think that was kind of a silly thing personally. And then a couple years ago, I had somebody saying, hey, I've got a race coming up and I can't get my license renewed. And I looked at his account, the background check was actually okay. And then we found out that the background check had somehow been updated without a background check. When we did a background check, we had a criminal record. We had somebody that just shouldn't have been out there in our community. And so as much as we want to look at ourselves as people who are really involved in the sport, want to be involved in the sport, and want to go out and make things effective and fun and all those things we want to do out there, we do have to have cautions. Those are things I never would have thought about years ago. Many of you heard about stories of somebody who's done something, and so you wonder and you're suspicious. Those are things that you know. When I grew up, in my church, there was a gentleman who was the leader of the Boy Scouts. My folks always wanted me to go into the Scouts. I would not go into the Scouts with that person as a leader. Later time and history and a police records proved me right. That's not someplace I wanted to be. And so when we do all these things, and it does become difficult for us to do things like even sign up as an official, and that's not even talking about our IT department and the problems we have with the website. We want to understand that we're out there and we have a responsibility and a duty. When we think about that, that's what USA Cycling is about. We're that umbrella that is trying to make sure things are done properly, make sure things are done well, and become a brand and a product. Right now, the biggest change we have is a new CEO. We have somebody who has come from the corporate environment with a really good success record. Somebody who has brought leadership and skill in a business environment to USA Cycling. I would say at this point in time, we're in an unprecedented period of growth, an unprecedented period of challenging everything we do. We have a CEO who doesn't have a background in cycling. He's an enthusiast. He rides his bike. This is kind of the fun part, is he actually went out and bought a bike shop. He wants to see what this looks like on the ground. He is looking to understand where we are. When I talked earlier about what it is we do and why we do it, is one of those really important questions to ask. Try to explain cycling to somebody who's never been involved. You ever remember having those conversations about why people shave their legs? Yep. Why people wear the funny helmets? Why people have the bicycles they do? Why people get so bizarre at a time trial? You know, why somebody can show up with something that probably equals, you know, an annual mortgage on their, or, you know, the payments on their house, just a ride. Those are all things that are really unusual. Now think about trying to explain how we get into cycling, what cycling looks like. How about categories? Why do we have categories? We have a lot of ideas. We have ideas about skill, we have ideas about safety, we have a lot of things. Try to explain that to people. Talk about how you become an official. Talk about the progression of officials. Talk about what the skill sets are. How do we get there? You start thinking about how do we break this down. Does it actually play a part in what our current status is in terms of racers? Anybody think about, does anybody want to guess how many registered racers we have nowadays? Somewhere around 55,000. That's down, okay? We continue to see a diminishment of people who want to buy a license. We've had a business model for years that was about, we have a license that you can buy so that you can do what you want. People remember back in the days of the Amateur Athletic Union and those kinds of things. I remember when I first ran marathon in college, I had to belong to the AAU. I had no idea why. Paid them $10, went out and ran my marathon, never thought about it. But that was the business model. And currently, that business model is changing. When we think about 55,000 members, we can also acknowledge that there's 100,000 members who used to have a license. What's our relationship with those people? We as officials maybe don't have a direct relationship, but we probably could sit down and we could think about 10 people off the top of our heads, every one of us, probably different 10 people, that used to be in the sport, that are no longer in the sport, don't want to be in the sport. How many people do you think in the United States identify with being a cyclist? And when we say a cyclist, somebody who thinks cycling is an activity, somebody who thinks cycling is a good activity, and somebody who thinks that engaging in it some manner or form is something that they want to do. 7 million. What's our membership perspective? It's that little tiny scope, and we keep crying about why we don't have resources, why we don't have new members, why we don't have people in the sport. So I would basically want to say that Rob has brought a perspective that has been long due within the sport, how we look at things, and I think he's bringing some business acumen to the sport that says we can't survive. We are dying, and if we keep going the way we are, then we're going to die. I used to have a saying I used to use that I took during a period of personal leadership and growth seminars that I'd been taking, which basically said, if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you always had before. Even that's really not true, because at some point you can't keep doing the same thing and get diminished results, because if you keep getting diminished results, at some point you're now talking to a wall. You no longer have an audience. And so we face difficult times in that, but I'm actually really excited about some of the things that Rob is bringing forward to us. One of the things that we want to do in the sport is great access. How many of you heard about our new membership program? A few of you, okay. So what are we doing now? Selling memberships that have licenses. We're not selling licenses, and then you can buy benefits. We're selling a membership. We want people to be associated with us. Anybody heard of the NRA? Maybe any members in here? I used to spend a lot of time doing that. I used to be a target shooter when I was young and really enjoyed that. It's a brand, right? It's something that people recognize. It's something that people actually have an emotional connection to. How many racers do you know have an emotional connection towards USA Cycling? Usually a negative one. But they have an emotional connection. Why do they have that? Their experience is it's somebody telling them what to do. It's not somebody saying, we think it's really cool you're a cyclist, and we want to figure out how to support you. We want to be the body that leads. We want to be the body of people that becomes the expert. We want to be the people that give you resources. That's part of the reinvention that we're going through right now, what USA Cycling is trying to do. We're trying to become that resource. We're trying to give people an emotional connection to sport. You want to be connected to Olympic athletes, Olympic development. You want to be connected to youth development, getting people to exercise and go out and enjoy something. Do you want to be involved in social advocacy? Do you want to do that? One of the big mistakes that USA Cycling has made in the past is to try to take things over. Anybody heard of a small company called Bridge? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Somebody was making money at cycling, right? They were providing a service. They were making it easy. What did USA Cycling try to do? Buy it. They tried to buy it. They tried to jump in. They tried to create their own system. It was a competition. And USA Cycling has decided very purposely to take themselves out of it. They've decided to say, let's figure out who we are and bring people together. Social advocacy. Somebody name any of the youth programs around here that you're familiar with? CCAT. There you go. We don't want to compete with that. We want to support that. Now, in the past, we had a really bad problem of taking the time to say, ooh, somebody's doing something better than us. Let's figure out how to do it better than them. Or let's make our brand irresistible. Let's create discounts. Let's do this. Let's do that. And we really weren't serving the community. We were competing with the community. And I think one of the things you're going to see now is that change where we are moving forward and we are really trying to create advocacy. And we're trying to create the paths that will allow people to have emotional connections with USA Cycling that are positive. Oh yeah, USA Cycling, I can call them. How many people here have gotten an argument with somebody who said, yeah, USA Cycling is really stupid? Or they don't know what they're doing? Okay.
I had the conversation, but it wasn't an argument.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's an argument, sometimes you're just listening. How many of you know somebody from USA Cycling? Personally know them? Okay, it's pretty good representative. You know, talk to people. I have a really good friend that, well, people know Adam Meyerson. Adam has a lot of conversations. People look at Adam as a fire stick. You know, he's out there, he's different. He's got some really strong opinions, but man, I respect that guy. He lives pretty honestly. He just puts it out there. And when people tell him that so-and-so doesn't know what they're doing or that we don't know what we're doing, he looks at him and goes, I actually know the people there. And I don't think that's true. Why don't you call them? Why don't you talk to them? One of the greatest things that we can do as advocates is actually connect people. And I think that's where we continue to go and move as officials. So again, that's kind of a really quick synopsis of what we're doing in terms of changes within the office. Now that's showing up in a huge number of ways. Permitting, upgrades. I'll talk a little bit about that in some of the other sessions as well. I'm not going to try to get into the middle of it. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to simplify things. One of the mantras that Rob has given us is radical simplification. Anybody want to think about a process in your life, maybe your job, that's hard? I used to be working as an architect, so I can tell you one of the hardest things that I can tell you is complying with building codes. There are so many things that are out there that you just would not believe about the number of exits in a room like this, how much space, what the square foot per person is, and then now we have really new regulations in terms of access about If I'm standing in that corner over there, I have to figure out how long it is before I can actually exit this building, and there are maximum distance. All sorts of new rules about how you put things together. Those things are really difficult. How would you make that simple? You could make that simple, but what might your result be? We don't need to worry about that. Just worry about it. People die. Something happens. Things change. So we always are faced with, how do you create radical simplification? I can tell you that I'm an expert in complicated. I mean, I am not where I'm at because I didn't care about complicated. I decided to become, at the time, a Category 1 official because I had progressed up a chart that I had no idea that there was a real progression or that it mattered. People encouraged me to go forward and do that. I went out and I spent a week going through the Cat A class, or Cat 1 class at the time, memorizing rules. Anybody know where rules are in the rule book? I can still remember where rules were in 1991. I can remember which side of the page, what third of the page it was, because we basically had to memorize the rules. And not only would we have to memorize that, we had to memorize the articles of incorporation, the bylaws of the organization. And by the time I got done with that class, I said, I think I'll run for the board of directors, because I understood how to do it. Those things are complicated, but again, it just points to becoming an expert in technical. I spend a lot of time, and I'll have to just admit that in '97, when I parted company with USA Cycling, my reputation was I didn't want to work with anybody. I was making it difficult for me. My duty was to protect the corporation. One of the things I was assigned to do, they actually now have legal counsel in-house, was to protect us and not do things that were against our own bylaws. And when you go into a meeting and somebody says, I want to do this, and I would say, that's not a good idea because it's not within our bylaws, the reception is pretty chilling. But those are the things that we always have to face. How do we create simplification? People have been through our new category system. Have anybody taken a chance to look online, the new policy on upgrades, categorization? Take a look at that. It's simple. It's really simple. I started out as a 5, and I think, this is really scary. Stay a 5, stay a novice, because that's the new name. I really want to race harder. Okay, you can go to 4. Now, there are people in this room that are going to argue that that's really dangerous. There's a lot of people outside this room that say that's absolutely crazy, and we should keep track of points, and we should do this, and we should do that. I can tell you that in 1995, I went to the World Championships in Bogota, Colombia with the U.S. team, and I had a long transfer in the back of a bus with a rider that some of you might know about, Bart Bowen. Bart Bowen moved. He left his home state because he couldn't get upgraded to Category 1. He was 1 point shy, and the person that was in charge there was never going to give him that upgrade. He went someplace else, won a race, got his upgrade, and became a professional. That story is historical throughout our organization. Blocks, roadblocks, more roadblocks. Now, sometimes that's important. Sometimes you just can't get past difficult. Sometimes you can't get past the fact that you really can't have too many feet between that corner in this room and an exit in an emergency. Those things are important. So we're trying to keep track of those things as we do simplification. I have to admit that is the hardest part of my job right now. How do I come up with things and make them simple? How do I come up with things that are important to you, to keep you educated? How do I keep that simple? How many people read my technical update? Probably notice that I get long-winded. I just really have a hard time expressing things shortly. I like to try to explain things. I try to give it a flavor. I try to give it an example. Right now, everybody's going cartoons. We want graphics. If you look at that upgrade chart, there's some really simple explanations. There's a little bit of a chart, and then there's that big arrow chart. That's really where people are at right now. They just want it simplified. They want to know how you're getting from point A to point B, and they don't want a lot of extra. I'm sitting here regaling you with history because I think history is important. I always think it's important to know how you get here, but a lot of people, that's really boring. They just don't care. They already accept that people shave their legs. They don't care about whether they get massages or not. They went out and bought a bike because somebody told them it would make them faster. They don't actually understand training. They don't really, maybe they don't want to. Or maybe somebody has come into the sport and they've already got a coach. They're paying hundreds of dollars a month to have somebody tell them how to ride their bike. Those are the things that are so different within the sport, and we really have to continue to grow with that. One of the things I want to start moving towards in what my theme is for this, and I think we're going to see reiterated throughout some of the presentations that we have here, and I really hope, and I'm excited to hear some of the things that we're going to be sharing today. I talked briefly about customer service. What we're really in the business of is member experience. Members have experiences. Everybody knows the term bucket list now. You know that a lot of athletes only compete 5 times a year. They have a very small set of agenda. They have a bucket list of things that they want to do. How are we getting them there? How are we creating that member experience for them? One of the things that Rob looked at was our mission statement when he came in. And he wants to know whether things are safe, fun, equitable, and measured. That's really our new mantra, is trying to understand those things. Is it safe? Now, that's not always our job, but as officials, we're often called upon to judge the safeness. You know, somebody can say, hey, I've taken care of that. It's not a problem. We can go, I'm really sorry, but, you know, you can't do the first corner of your criterion with a steel pole in the middle of the road just because the city said that they didn't want to take that out. That's just not safe. Somebody can say, oh yeah, I think it's safe. We can say, no, it's not safe. But we're there to make that final judgment. We charge the race director with being responsible for that overall safety. The official is out there to make sure that that actually happens. And there are times that we have to cancel races. Anybody gotten to cancel a race before, stop a race for safety? One of my worst experiences was a stage race where we lost a course at the last minute because they said that we had essentially the round parking lot of a big resort, but they apparently hadn't actually talked to anybody. We were trying to race as people were checking out. No traffic control, cars parked, cars coming in, people trying to check out, leave, backing out, people walking through the race course with luggage. Said stop. We were 2 laps in and realized that nothing was really set up. So what did we do? We ended up moving to some subdivision that hadn't been built yet with paved roads. Things were really on the short side of organization, and I ended up using a water valve cover and a piece of rebar as the bell for the day. But we did get the race back together. But again, we had to make that race safe for people. Fun. How many people go to your event thinking fun? I'm going to challenge you today. When's the last time you went to a bike race and said, this is going to be fun today? There are a few people out there. Good.
If I didn't, I wouldn't go.
And I want to challenge us on that because I think a lot of us do this for lots of different reasons. And it should be fun for us. What happens when you go someplace and somebody's having fun? It's contagious. That's the word I was looking for. Contagious, and that's the good contagious we're looking for. But we have to understand that if we're not having fun, what do you think that's going to translate to?
Also, everyone else.
That's also contagious. We're going to be crabby. We're going to be seen as officious. We're going to be seen as any number of things that are probably not positive. So when we have fun, other people have fun. How do you have fun when you have somebody who won't put their helmet on? Why do we want that person to put their helmet on? Safety. Now, it's not about my safety or corporate safety. You could get hurt, and I care about you. We take that message, and people start to go, oh, okay, that's great. I can understand that. Most people can. Sometimes you can't, and you have to deal with it. Which gets us to the next part, equitable. Anybody ever disqualified anybody? Had those difficult decisions? What does that do? Now, from the old mantra of customer service, what's the implication? That person's a customer and they must be right. From the version of equitable, we actually did our job. we actually created an environment that was equitable for everybody. Equitable for that person because they broke the rules. It was equitable for the pack because now they don't have to worry about that. They know that that kind of behavior isn't tolerated. There's a saying that I came across in Peru last year when I was down there for the Pan American Games, and got to sit in a lot of traffic because Peru has a lot of bad traffic. And Peru has really interesting driving. Have a system of, if you want to go there, just go there. If you want to cut somebody off, just cut somebody off. If you think you need to be in that exit and you're 3 lanes over, just cut across everybody. If you're going to turn left and you're in a turn lane and the light's only so long, just pull into the middle, wait. You know, we see people do that all the time. But in Peru, you'd start stacking. They now have 3, 4 cars, and then you have 2 more sets behind you, and then somebody else has come clear around the other side and is now cut in front of everybody else. Normal. So do you think that is the traffic law in Peru? Well, it's written pretty similarly to ours. But it's what's tolerated. What's tolerated becomes the law. So when we do our jobs as official, what we tolerate becomes the law. Anybody ever talked about the gray area of regulations? All the time. I mean, if you were strictly going by the rule book all the time, people would ask questions like I was asked. In about 1993 or so, as I was moving up, I was at a stage race back when we used to actually wear suit jackets, and the senior official at the time came up to me and says, "Randy, why do you have that rule book in your back pocket?" I had it in my back pocket, so if I needed to look something up, I could. I had a suit jacket on. I stupidly thought that was kind of covering it up, but he knew exactly what that, weird shape was in the back of my suit jacket. And he goes, "What do you do with that?" My mind was like, I'm going to hit people with it? What is it that we're going to do with those rules? So there's a really fine line between what we do. So many times we have to interpret something from what we consider to be a gray area. But again, overall, equitable, what we tolerate is the regulation. So it's always a challenge for us to think carefully about how we enforce regulation. When we enforce regulations, when we don't enforce regulations. Literally, the book has so many regulations in it that you could whack people all day long. My mantra is, did it matter? Is this the moment in time that matters? Is this where that matters? Well, that person changed their line. Was anybody around them? Why would we do something? How many people remember days when it was sort of regionally applied? If you took your hands off the bar, you're disqualified. Why would you do that? Did it matter? Was that person off the front? I have had so many phone calls between 95 and now about somebody got disqualified. Why? They took their hands off the bar. Was anybody around them? No. And why? Talk with them. You can talk about how that could be dangerous. You can talk about losing control. I always actually enjoy the videos of the guy who crosses the line by themselves, throws their hands in the air, and then crashes. It's a little bit of Darwinism there, survival of the fittest. But again, would we actually need to apply that rule at that point in time? No, actually, that person got all the learning they needed. It happened. So again, equitable is about what we tolerate and what we enforce. So think about allowing the creation of members' experiences. Now, we can create the members' experience by how we interact with those. We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to give them what they want. We don't have to tell them that they don't know anything about it. We can say, "I'm sorry, this is simply what it is. Regulation, I have to enforce that." And that's the experience they get to have. But when we're having fun, go back to that, we're creating the ability for people to have member experiences that are memorable and meaningful. What's that last word I was using? Measured. What's that mean? You want to guess what that means? What do people want to see when they finish a bike race?
Name and light
Results.
They want to see their name in lights is what they want to see, but we're going to put it on paper for them. I have a local organizer in Colorado that actually has big screens that they mount on the outside of the results trailer, and they have running results. It's happening all the time. You can go up to an iPad, you can hit it, bring stuff up. That instant gratification is key. People want to know that. I alluded to what we used to do in the old days. We had speed drive cameras, we developed the film, and the next day we had results, and we thought that was pretty fantastic. Now people want to know what they've done. They want to know how they measured themselves. People are out there to measure themselves. Why do we have gravel grinders and Grand Fondos? People want to measure themselves. They may not be interested in whether that's first or second, but they want to know if they beat some average time. They want to know if they were better than they were last year. When I ran a marathon, I went through those results and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled until I found my name, and it was like, it's recorded. I did that. And put it in a scrapbook, and someday somebody can go, have you ever run a marathon? I can say yes, and I go, well, I don't think you did. I can pull out that newspaper clipping. It's actually in a box somewhere in the attic, but I don't think I could find it easily. But those are the things we're trying to do. Measured is about that. Now, when we create results, when we create accuracy, when we have to take those decisions that said, no, here's what the measured result is, those are things people want. So when we do all this, what kind of a person are we? We're an expert. Now, we could be a policeman, or we could be an expert. When I say you could be a policeman or an expert, what does that bring up for you? What's a policeman do? When you think of that context. Pardon?
Enforcement.
Enforcement. Sitting on the side of the road, radar gun, writing tickets. Generally, you know, walking up to your car with the sound of the leather and the starched clothes rustling, and asking to see your license and registration. You know, it's an authority figure, right? Now, you can be an authority without having to be an authority figure. You can be an expert. The UCI has a booklet on their website under their commissaries page that talks about commissaries, experts serving cycling. I think it's a great way to look at things. As an expert, you're going to be knowledgeable. When I put out a TD update, I'm trying to give you information. I have been stalling, and I finally gave you some insights into the new membership program because it was stalled. We couldn't get it delivered. But you needed to know about it. The fact that we're going to call people novices. The fact that we're going to change how you upgrade. The fact that we now have a new permit system for race directors. All these things are changes that you need to know about. What's the worst thing that happens to you when you're in the field? Somebody comes up and asks you a question about what's happened. Why is this? And you're kind of going, I don't know. Never heard of that. There's a new rule change. Never heard of it. You're not an expert. It puts you in a defensive position. We don't want to do that. Part of my job is to continue to serve you the best I can. How many of you have ever called me? Got a few people. Email. Call me, email me, get information firsthand. There is never a problem with that. I would say that I probably spend, I don't know, the first 4 hours of every day just answering emails because people have questions. And I will give you answers. I'll tell you when I don't have answers. But I will give you the ability and the capacity to be an expert. You need that information, it's there for you. That's really where we want to continue to move, is to continue to build you up so that you can actually address questions in the field. You have to like what we're doing. Nope. But I'm going to go back to fun. What's the best way to talk about something if you disagree with it? And I can tell you that my job has got more things that you don't even know about that I disagree with that I get to manage. Those are things that I have personal opinions about. There are things that I have philosophical opinions about. There are things that I have different world and life experiences about that I'm actually dealing with. But they are part of the organization. They are who we are. We can tell people that we don't know why that regulation came into effect, but it came into effect. And it is something we're going to force because we want racing to be the same for people all over the country. I don't want to arrive, and I believe that's one of the topics we have here during the summit, is how we apply things across the country. How do we look at it? Are we disqualifying people over here for taking their hands off the bars, but over here we don't do it? How many people know that you used to have to wear socks? They used to have to be a certain height. And officials used to spend time disqualifying people for that.
And measuring.
Yeah.
Not too high.
Now the UCI wants to measure them, and I can actually tell you where that one came from. How many people think that's one of the silliest things you've ever seen? How many people know Adrian Levesque from Canada? Few people know him. He's the one that's got the famous picture measuring socks last year at the tour. He was grateful the fact that he had his head down and people couldn't recognize him immediately, except the entire officiating community. So I used to serve on the UCI's Material Commission, which is about equipment and technology and things that can happen. So we used to say that you could wear a shoe cover as long as the climate conditions prevailed and that was useful. Why do people wear shoe covers? Aerodynamics. It made a difference. It was measurable. I can also attest to the fact that not shaving your knees was an aerodynamic advantage as well because it created stubble, it created a difference in airflow. Those are those things you know from the old days that nowadays, the new technology, you can now buy socks with special shapes that give you increases in ability to cut through the wind. So when they decided for some reason that we really had to enforce that, we then said, if you're on the track and you're inside, you can't use an overshoe. Not sure why they did that, but that was a decision they made. Now, part of the UCI's whole equipment emphasis happened because of cycling. 1996, we had a superbike being developed. We spent, with sponsors, around $12 million developing a bike that we were going to put a team pursuit team on. We were going to win gold medals. Anybody remember the result? French brought 4 guys off the Tour de France, put them on bikes, killed everybody. We spent $12 million in 2.5 years developing that and a team, and it didn't pan out. So the UCI looked at that as an arms race. Who has the most money to spend on technology? So they started restricting things. The same thing with overshoes. They said, oh, we don't want to use overshoes on the track. We shouldn't have to deal with that. There's no reason. There's no climate. You know, it's not outdoors. We're not protecting against freezing rain or something of that sort. So what happens the next year? The Brits spend about $12 million designing shoes. They're now doing one-off carbon fiber shoes that will do the same thing. The moment that they banned shoe covers, the Australians asked, and this was the same year before the shoe covers were actually banned, being discussed, they said, how high can we do socks? Why? Because it makes a difference. It makes an aerodynamic advantage. So we do have some rules that seem really crazy. Anybody know about stock car racing or Formula One racing, that they have equipment inspection? They have people walking around measuring millimeters because it makes a difference. And when you get to the highest levels of the sport, that's what it looks like. Sometimes you're out there measuring socks, and we don't really necessarily want to do that. The nice part about what we get to do at USA Cycling is we get to leave that for the very upper echelons of the sport. Leave that to the UCI. We don't have to run around and check people's socks. We do want to make sure people are properly attired. We want to make sure people don't have butt cheeks hanging out. We want to make sure that people actually are in racing attire that will suit them, that won't create safety hazards. But we don't have to go further than that. We want to continue to think about how we move forward as an expert in officiating. You're in this room, and I know everybody here is unique. Everybody has something that they bring to their game. If I was to go around this room, a lot of you might say, oh, I do X, Y, and Z, and we'd probably pick a common theme. But within that common theme, every one of you is different. When I think about myself, I used to think I was really good at knowing the rules. And then I used to think I was really good at interpreting the rules. And then I continued to think that I could handle really tough situations. And in the end, what I really know about myself, what makes me unique, is my ability to listen and my ability to understand where people are coming from and my ability to mediate. Taken courses in mediation and found that that was really what my officiating style was. I can walk into a situation, I can have a really difficult situation, and I can hear people, and I can have a discussion. And boy, there are times I lose my cool, there are times that I don't do it the best, but that's really what I bring. And so somebody else in this room may say, this is what I bring. Every one of us brings something to the team. I think that's the really important thing for us to remember here is that we are a team. That we are people that come together with our own expertise, our own experience, and we bring something to the game. I'm a motor official. I know a lot about bike racing. I'm an international official. I know what I'm looking for. I know where to go. I go down a descent really well. I'm not that kind of motorcycle rider. I'm a good motorcycle rider, but no, I can't sit off the front and work with a breakaway. I had the experience at the Giro d'Italia with the information services, people that go give all the time splits and everything else. One of the guys, his motorcycle he had equipped with BMX pegs, or not BMX, but motocross pegs. So, flat platforms, big spikes. He was replacing them every 3 days because he was grinding them off. And he could go down hills like you just couldn't believe. I can't do that. That's not my expertise. That's not what I bring to the sport. If I was on a road where I can go, oh, well, that's going to happen. That's an expertise I bring. Frank and I got to talk on the way up here. Frank Maxim's here to help with the motor class tomorrow, talking about how we are working on training and we're doing things nowadays with 2-ups. You've been around a race, you pretty much know what's going to happen. We all know what happens when we don't ring the bell at the right time. What are we set up for? Emergency management. Better score this lap, better score the next lap, better figure that out because now we're going to have to talk. Those things all come to our forefront. So I really challenge everybody to start thinking about what it is they bring to their game. How many people have got national assignments? Okay. You get national assignments for a lot of different reasons. And I'd love to talk to people if you have questions about that. We can spend some time discussing that. What do you bring to the game? Are you just another category A, or are you another category B? Do you happen to be a C? Quite frankly, in my opinion, I would like to be able to walk into any area of the country and assign everybody locally. Because I think we could actually do that. Because people can educate themselves. We're starting to launch some new online learning, trying to put things out there to give people an advantage of understanding things in their own time and space. But when we think about building a team of people, everybody in this room works with teams of people. Normally a minimum of 2, 4, 6, 8 people in an event. How many of you look at that list of people and go, oh, okay? Somebody's not bringing their A game, right? Let's be honest. There are people we don't want to work with, but there are people that we can make the situation the best that we can. One of the things I do as a leader is I go, where's my weakest link? How do I support that person? How do I make it better for them? How do I get the best out of them that I possibly can? And the same thing when we put together a crew for national championships, I don't look at that and go, I don't know who that person is, let's assign them. I go, what do I know about that person? Pick up the phone and I'll call somebody. I find some amazing, talented people out there because I just didn't know about them. Local in their communities, they're doing a great job. We find out we can use them locally. We can bring somebody in as an apprentice. We do a lot of those things, but it's really difficult to say, who's out there? What are they bringing to the table? If your persona is to always find something wrong, I can go, I'm going to have that person review the permit, or I'm going to have that person review all the distances. I'm going to have that person review the timelines, because they're probably going to find something wrong. Then we're going to solve it. If you have the person that always shows up and they just are not prepared, but they're a fun person to be around, be the cruise director. Has everybody been on a race where you have to figure out where you're going to eat that night and where you're going to go? I call that person the cruise director. Something I just don't like. People come to me and go, when are we going to dinner? I go, when you're hungry? And other people are going, hey, we should all get together. It's like, I'm going to put that person in charge of that. I'm going to figure out what that person does well, and I'm going to try to use them to my advantage. So when we, again, think about how we come together as a crew, recognize your skill sets, recognize the skill sets of others, and bring those people into community and create the best thing that you possibly can. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, 2 minutes, so you're supposed to switch to leadership.
Shall I switch to leadership?
Well,
I'm not sure who put the agenda together.
Keep going.
Yeah.
For another 52 minutes.
Another 52 minutes.
If you so choose.
Okay. I know I'm not going to do another 52 minutes on that.
That's fine. We can
Yeah.
we can fill in. You go till you're ready,
Yep.
and we'll fill in the rest.
So some of the changes we're making, I just want to just briefly touch on them. I touched briefly on the categorization system. Why do we call people a novice? What do you think's out there?
Easier for people to know what it means.
Okay, I've never been to a bike race before. I just went out and spent $5,000 on this bicycle because I think cycling is cool. And I've seen people race, and somebody told me there's a race, and I'm going to show up. Where does that person fit? Oh, you're a 4 or 5. 4 or 5. Who's a 1, 2? What does that mean?
I want to be number one.
Yeah, I want to be number 1. Novice, beginner, we had a big debate, you know. How many people remember when we used to call people novice? Used to be out there. We used to have a naming system that when Norbert was really much more influential than they are now in terms of mountain bike and running the organization. But we just want people to be able to understand where they're going. We would like to see race directors just novice categories, not combine them. Now, there's always the issues of daylight, how long I have a course, all those other things come into play. People are coming to my event. We like people to know where they fit in, where they start out. I've been a novice. This is really fun. I'm coming back. I'm getting strong. I'm having a great time. How do I get to 4? You just go onto your account and you request it. We can now self-upgrade to 4. Now, some people are scared about that. Some people think that, you know, it's going to be really dangerous. We don't have that information in-house to suggest that that's a problem. But we'll see. We'll see what's happening. And now we have a point structure that says you should go to 3 because you've done X, Y, and Z. You no longer have to decide how many people were in this category and how many people in that category. Was it a race? Yes. How many people were in it? This many. Here's your point scale. You get points. You don't have minimum distances. It's not this for a criterion, it's not that. I mean, I can upgrade all on criterions? Yeah. Does that sound really radical? People have been here? Yeah, that's really radical. Is it going to work? We think so. We're going to test it, we're going to figure out what we can do with it. But we want people to have a really clear, understandable, fairly easy to understand path. Anybody looked at the track upgrade? Track is a really hard thing. Some of you that don't have tracks and you know you don't have to worry about it, it's a hard thing because nowadays people don't go out just to ride the track. When I started, I went out to ride the track because I thought a velodrome was really cool. And there was sprinting and there was endurance events, and quickly I figured out that I was an endurance rider and I was a really bad sprinter. I was scared to death to be a sprinter, so I just did endurance, and you know that's sort of the way it went. But you upgraded through a fairly simple path, similar to what we have or used to have on road. And nowadays people come out of the box going, I want to sprint. I don't want to do that long stuff. I don't want to have my tongue hanging out of my front wheel. I just want to go do that fast stuff for 12 seconds. That's what I want to do. So how do we upgrade those people? Again, we have to think outside the box. We've got a system that I think will probably change radically over the next year. It'll probably change a few times this year as we try to refine that and figure out how we get people to where they want to be. Why are we doing that? Because that's that member's experience. That's what they want to purchase. That's where they want to be. That's where they want to compete. Does anybody know that you can go to the sprint championships at the elite level with essentially no categorization? You know why? You have to go fast. You're either fast or you're not fast. You can either control the bike or you can't control the bike. You can go fast and you can keep up, then we can talk about control, we can talk about other issues. We're trying to create paths for people to do what they want to do. Now, again, I talked a little bit about what's popular right now. It's gravel, it's Fondo. What do they want? They want to be measured. USA Cycling wants to give them what they need. If you want to go do that, that's great. What do we have to offer you? What do you think USA Cycling has to offer the gravel and the Fondo community? We can have results, we can have safety, we can give them that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is USA Cycling has an expensive but a really incredibly good insurance policy. That is valuable to people. How many people have thought about the insurance requirement for their state and owning a motor vehicle and said, I really don't care about it? What happens when you get in your first accident? Then you care. Then you really care. And so that's one of the things that we can actually start with. We can assist you over here. Oh, your product's too expensive. Well, can your product do this? No, it can't. Maybe that's a good investment for me. We have timing companies. So when we think about a Grand Fondo or gravel, do we need officials? Maybe the race director needs somebody to help them. Maybe they need people to assist the results company. But where do we fit in? Again, all those things are how things are changing. What is it we get to offer people? Interestingly enough, one of the things that Grand Fondo New York, that I'm sorry to hear was canceled, they don't want doping. They also don't want electric bikes taken over. So we actually have the products that can help them. We have the UCI's tablets. We can go out and measure bikes for detecting motors. we can bring anti-doping resources in, and by permitting under USA Cycling, they can actually have the enforcement of USADA. Those are products that we can bring to the sport at any level. So we have to continue to think about what that looks like. So again, from upgrading, what do we offer? One of the things we're doing now is letting race directors permit directly online. They just get in, they load up their information, and they can get a permit. What's the process we have now that you're experiencing? If you're assigned a race, where do you think that permit has been?
Through the LA.
Onto the LA. That LA probably has somebody who reviews permits. They're looking at for details and information that's supposed to be on there. What's happened with prize lists the last few years? We had a lot of problems with race organizers saying, here's my prize list, it's $1,000. Somewhere down the fine print, there was like, if only 4 people show up, then I'm only giving away 200 or 100 or whatever. We said, look, we need to let people know what they're racing for. Why did I get out of bed? There's going to be at least this minimum. If you want to increase the prize list, that's great, but you can't diminish the prize list. Those are those little details that had to happen. So right now, we're trying to work through our permitting system so that it goes in direct. That means that the LA doesn't have the same oversight. Some LAs didn't have any oversight. They pretty much just passed it through. Other places have detailed review. Some places have people that are really good at going through and saying, hey, this doesn't actually work. By the way, you probably ought to add 15 minutes here. By the way, you've got things so tight that you can't actually manage the event. Those are officials' perspectives quite often because we have to have the ability to actually be able to create results, do that measured thing for people. But again, as the new system comes into place, what's one of the biggest questions you have at a road race if you're the chief referee and you've got motors and cars coming? I want to know if people are insured. New system's going to actually allow you to look in and do that. We move forward, we've talked about first reports of occurrence being online. We've got a system developed that's still not ready to launch, but the ability to be out there with your mobile phone recording stuff that will get transmitted when you get back to a cell zone. So we can actually do things that we do now with technology. We take pictures, we write little notes. We can do all those things. Those things can be entered directly into those systems as we get them developed. Those are some of the things that are changing for us. Everybody knows that we have IT struggles. We have, this is a little bit embarrassing, but back in 1995, membership had just gone into Uber Excel mode. In other words, we were keeping track of people essentially in a spreadsheet. I think it was called Lotus 123 back then, but I may have dated myself there. But we were keeping track of it. Some of the first databases were just coming online, and so we were taking that Excel spreadsheet and we were feeding a database with it. And as the organization continued to grow, we were using resources from USOC at the time, and they had some really antique systems in terms of how we would do things like produce labels. And so we'd always have to translate things back down to technology of the late 60s and 70s to do that. And over time, as new things came online, does anybody know what IT costs are for a normal company? Really pretty big. They're really big. And so as you try to keep up with the world, you can either do it the cheap way or you can do it the expensive way. Sometimes you get the same results, sometimes you don't. Anybody seen cars in Cuba? See a lot of the old 57 Chevs and that kind of stuff. It's really cool. You ever get close to one of those? Oh, truck tires. Or, well, that's really an interesting way to do that, that they've pulled something back together and then they've used it again. That's really what's happened over time. You take a small organization with small resources, and at some point you end up with 3 different forms of a database that somehow talk to each other, that very few people know how to create that interaction. And at some point people pass, some people leave, and some people leave before they get the job that they were assigned to do done. And you end up with something that's called legacy. Legacy is trying to think of the name of the show. What was the space show where they had the heads in the jar and they're all talking? Sorry, I can't remember that. It was kind of a cartoon. Futurama. Thank you. There we go. We got somebody who's really paying attention. I like that. Futurama. They got the heads on the wall and they talk about things. That's what our legacy system is. It's this source of truth that doesn't talk well with anything. And right now, we've spent so much money trying to update things. We've actually now got a racer membership working pretty well, but as you all know, the technical memberships don't yet. We are getting there. We're trying to create those things, but we're having difficulty. And again, when we think about our work as officials, what's our source of truth? The rule book. How many people use the rule book online? You can download it. You can download it by chapter. You can download the whole thing, but you can download it. Anybody want to guess how long ago it was that the UCI published a rule book? Almost 10 years. I used to get boxes, literally boxes of updates, new books and things that I had to go through and pull pages out and take 3 pages out of this chapter and put three pages back in. It's all online now. When your writer says, I want to see that rule, what might you tell them? You have your app? Yeah. Do you have your app? Open it up. There's a rule book. You can go look at it. People can do that. And so we have to continue to adapt to the times. We need to continue to move forward on that. I want to try to bring this to a close. In terms of where we're going, what we're doing is we're working really hard to move forward. And sometimes that doesn't always feel comfortable for people. How many people in this room enjoy change? I enjoy it after I get done with it, but change is usually pretty hard. It's difficult.
It sucks.
Yeah. Like right now, how many people are enjoying the lifestyle changes that the emergency, the health crisis that we're in right now? It's not very much fun. I think we're going to figure it out. I think we're going to move forward. I think the next time this happens, we'll kind of go, I still got toilet paper. We're going to be fine. But again, change is hard. We're doing what we can and working really hard to create that. We continue to move people within our office, and we've done a lot of things to increase things. How many people have noticed that there's more media about cycling, that when you go to the website, there's more information? It's because we've really increased our media presence. Talked earlier about how do we attract people to the sport. You know somebody, you saw a bike race, you know somebody that did race, you expressed some interest in it, somebody got you involved in it. How do people in the rest of the world know about cycling? Limited exposure to the Tour de France, maybe. You know, what gets broadcast in the summer, the Lance increase effect and the Lance decrease effect that we had in the sport. That's how people are associated with the sport. We understand that we have to attract people, so we're spending a lot of time and we're spending a lot of resources to let people know what this sport is about, who our stories are, who our heroes are. Anybody notice that most of the media coverage that you see on our website is about women? Women are, we're proud of them. We're seeing some great results there. We want to celebrate those people. We want to create that connection. We want people to understand that they can come to us and they can understand what's going on. So again, I want to talk about how we create that safe, fun, equitable, and measured event. How do we do that? It's a bit of a mantra for us right now. That, along with simplification. When you see something that you're dealing with, how can you simplify it? How can we break it down easier? How can we make it easier to understand? Pick up that phone and say, hey, Randy, remember that rule X? That's way too complicated. We'll talk to people, figure out what we need to do. Anybody know how we change rules? We have a committee that actually talks about those things. Staff is then charged with taking those pieces and deciding what to do with it. We have several more processes that we vet it with, but we actually rely on our committees. Talk to us about what's going on. Talk to people. We have a road committee. We have a track committee. We have people representing. We have athletes. We have officials on all those committees. So it's not just a committee of people who want to do X, Y, and Z. We actually try to fill those committees with people that have a stake in the game. We want that to happen. When we think about rules, this is just an aside, but when we think about rules, why do you think we have rules? Why do you think we have the rules that we have? Safety level playing field is a great answer over the top. How do you think a rule got there? Something happened. And people go, that's not fair. That didn't work. Right now, I have a new FAQ out on criteria. I think Tony saw it because he put it on agenda is things we're going to talk about. I will spend some time on that tomorrow. We talk about free laps. People have thousands of opinions. We were getting a lot of pressure from one of the large organizers about saying, essentially, I want to run this like stock car racing. I want to throw out a yellow flag, put everybody back in. You have a flat tire, just go in the pit. I said, but in a stock car, you start losing laps. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. We want you to do that in the last half of the race, but we don't want you to do that in the front half of the race. Well, where's that dividing line going to come down? How do you think I get to look as an official going, oh, you're a lap late, sorry, dude, go home. But everybody else got to come in. Yeah, they did. Okay, we want to be careful of those kind of things. There was an expression of saying, this is really stupid that you have this rule that says you can't win a preem after a free lap. I said, why is that stupid? It says, because it doesn't happen. Free lap doesn't do anything for anybody. It's like, that rule's there because it did help somebody. And it helped somebody consistently enough that that rule actually showed up. So when we have these changes as we move forward, you're going to see changes every year. We have little things that we adjust. Anybody, again, we don't have a lot of track riders here, so I'll pick on that for a moment. Junior omniums. We have a committee that's passionate about trying to figure out what's the best pathway for development for juniors. And we have another group of people who think juniors just ought to just go be able to do whatever they want. And there's other people that say, no, as a junior, we want them to develop in a big fashion. We want them to actually experience fast races and slow races and endurance races and short races. And so we continue to adjust those things to try to create that. The rules we have, we sometimes try to mirror something that's happening internationally. We sometimes spend time trying to figure out what serves our public the best. The UCI does not like criteriums in stage races. What's the biggest number of races we have in the United States? Criteriums. We have to adjust. We have to figure out how to make those things work. So again, we spend a lot of time trying to create that every year. And again, my point in bringing this up is it's an open process. You are experts. You have dealt with something in the field, and we need that feedback because you're an important part of the overall team of people. There's a lot of people that believe that out here, I'm doing my thing and I'm doing it right. One of the themes in this summit is to talk about how we enforce things nationally. I referred to that earlier. We want to understand how we do things one place might affect it someplace else. One of the biggest things we have to look at sometimes as USA Cycling is I can do this rule here, I can do this process here, and it really works in, let's say, the Northeast. We've got a lot of racing communities, we've got a lot of clubs, we have a lot of organization. But how does that work in Idaho or Montana? Probably doesn't. We have certain things that happen in events that we have to write rules for because in California, they have huge groups of people and they have huge groups of experienced people. One of the reasons I actually focused on being an official is my first Masters National Championship. At the time, it was 35. I slowed down racing about 34. I said, okay, you know, I'll be a Masters next year. And the next thing they did is they changed Masters to 30. So suddenly I was racing the 30 to 34s and I was losing badly. I tried it one more time at 35. Guess who I was racing against? Remember, Thurlow Rogers. He was still racing as a professional. I was racing Masters. It really wasn't that much fun for me. So I decided that I would go someplace else. So when I talk about how things look differently in the country, if you go to a criterium in Southern California, you will actually have a 1-2 Masters field. And they are riding like 1s and 2s. And in that same community, you can have a Masters Open race, which now has that person called a novice now, and a person who was an ex-pro, maybe only a few years ago, maybe last year. Consider what kind of disparity might show up in that race and how you might have to officiate that. You got people who can take their hands off their bars and touch people, and people that can go rub shoulders, and people that can go around the corner rubbing knees, keeping somebody out of their spokes. And you can have people doing balancing acts, rubbing wheels, and you have people that at the slightest feeling of panic are just going to crash. They're going to throw on the brakes and fall down. So that community creates a whole different vision of how you might have to. So in closing all this, I just want to say that the change is inevitable. Change is not always fun, but in the end, we want to get back to the point of having fun because we're having bike races. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to encourage our communities, people that are having to consider the health issues and crisis that we're in right now, cancellation of events. That is not fun stuff to talk about. It's now changed. It's something that's a reality we have to look at. We have to understand how to work with people. how to deal with their communities that they're dealing with. We'd all like this to be over and get back to having fun, because that's what we do. We enjoy the sport of bike racing. Again, I'm here because I continue to have fun. This weekend is fun for me. Sitting at my desk day to day is not always fun, because it's not bike racing, it's the administration of bike racing. That's not always fun. Getting out in the field and seeing people race their bike, that's always fun. Getting to see people on the line and give instructions, have some humor, that's fun for me. Somebody wants to know how to register, I can help them do that. That's fun for me. Being somebody who can give people the information that they need so that they can do and create the event that they want, that's fun for me. And I encourage you to all keep that in mind, that the day that you don't want to have fun in this anymore, it's time to step away. And you should do that without ever feeling bad about it, because you've just decided that's the point in your life that you're at. At some point, it gets too hard to get up super early in the morning and drive 3 hours. At some point, it's no longer fun to stand in the rain at a cyclocross race. There's no shame in that. You put in your dues. Sometimes it's just time to say, hey, somebody else can do that. Probably one of my biggest changes in my life was in 2011. As an architect, I'd suffered through the recession. Things were not coming back. The few clients we had were belligerent, and because of my negotiating skills, those are the clients and jobs I got. I decided to move off and say I want to actually work at being a professional official. I want to do a lot of things. And I started getting a lot of assignments, and I was working internationally in road, track, and cyclocross and paracycling. I was really enjoying that. And later that summer, the UCI said, you can only be an expert in 2 things, so choose. And it really frustrated me, because cyclocross was something that was really near and dear to me. I really enjoyed cyclocross. Loved track, road and track as well. But I ended up deciding that I would stick with road and track, because that allowed me to continue to do paracycling as well. Something else that really gives me a lot of enjoyment and a lot of fun to work with those athletes. But in that process, sort of mourned that, like, greater events. I want to, like to go to Jingle Cross. I'd like to go to a World Cup. I'd like to go in the Pacific Northwest, because they used to have some great muddy events there. I want to come up to New England because they got this really cool style of cyclocross, and I love to see the participation. And then we had a miserable winter. And I said, that's okay. I can live with that. And at that point in time, I said, I'm okay with this. I can actually step back from that, because, hey, I'm in this endangered group of people that shouldn't be here this weekend, so yeah, I don't actually have to go stand out in the weather. I can actually step away from that. There's other of us that say, hey, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. I had a friend who was a good official who basically said, I only want to be COM 2. That's where I feel like I excel. That's where I feel like I enjoy things the most, so we did that for a few years. And then I realized that what he really liked to do at COM 2 was chat with the leaders, go up, give them their time splits, create that relationship with them, snap a picture. And finally I said, you should be a photographer. He is. He's a professional photographer now. He's retired from teaching, and his photography is excellent. Most of it's nature-based, but that's the thing he found out that he loved, but he stepped away from the sport at a point where it's like, I'm doing a good job. I enjoy what I'm doing, but that's not what I want to do anymore. Bring somebody in and replace yourself. Anybody in here got a progression plan? What's going to happen when you're gone? Yeah, we got a room full of people over there that are actually your next step that you're bringing into the sport. There's so many times that we tend to think that now that I'm at the top of my game, I want to protect my turf. Now, that's something you don't always think that you're doing, but it happens a lot. It happens a lot. We talked about people getting promoted, as category upgrades. That happens the same for officials as it does for the riders. There can be protection at the top. We've had a lot of changes over the years in some of our programs to try to avoid that. And at some point you kind of look back and you go, average age of officials right now is 55 plus. There's a lot of people that are graying out that are going to be gone in the next few years. We have to continue to fill the pipeline. The thing that's really unusual about cycling and officiating now is that the average age of people coming into the sport is about 45. That point in life where families have settled down enough, they've got some extra time, perhaps they have a junior or a young rider or a family member that's now gotten involved in the sport, they're there to support them. We have to change how we look at things. Right now we have a set of progression rules that talk about starting at 23. People in the room know Zach Mano. Became a track official, international track official last year at the age of 28. Okay, that's unusual. He's got a long life of service ahead for him. A lot of people don't come into the sport at that age. So what do we have to do? We have to continue to create member experience. Talked a lot about that, about the riders. What's your member experience?